Hello, beautiful soul. My name is Simi Poten. Welcome. Today, I am here with Puneet Rathore, and we have been doing these episodes where we dive into yogic wisdom. And one of the traditions that Puneet is very familiar with is called Advaita Vedanta, which is a non dualistic tradition, which falls into one of the four paths of yoga, which is Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge. So these different paths of yoga and these different traditions are all here to liberate a human from suffering, to understand that there is suffering in this world and that there is a way to cease suffering. So the tradition we will be covering in this episode is Advaita Vedanta, which is the non-dualistic teachings. So hope this conversation supports your journey.
I think every time like suffering arises, it's essentially something where we are trying to control, right? Like we are trying to fight what is happening and wanting to push our own idea of what should happen. And that struggle is the sort of anxiety, discomfort, terror, fear, whatever we want to call it. But like it's the same feeling every single time. Like,
Yes.
my teacher just always keeps asking me whenever anyone says that they're feeling a certain thing, they're like, is this the first time you felt this way? Uh, and it's always no. This is a repetitive thing.
Yes.
And so like, when are you going to stop? That's the question.
Maybe we don't want to. Maybe
Yeah,
that's
that's also true.
addiction. Yeah.
We are addicted to it. I think that was one of the things you were talking about, right? We sometimes get addicted to even studying and being on the path
Yeah.
because that gives
Yeah.
us a sense of identity, that gives us some stability. Um, because being pathless is scary. Is then if I'm not even pathless, then what am I then? But all of those things keep coming forth. Whatever our crutches are,
Mhm.
life will always show us that this is our crutch and slap us with that crutch. And we will have to then feel the pain of that. And, if we are a consistent and, what's the word? Um, I think this is a word that, what's his name? Nisargadatta Maharaj uses, where you're earnest. If you're
Okay.
earnest in your endeavor to want to be free, then all of the things that we hold on to, they just keep coming up because the life keeps showing us the reasons why we are attached or what we are attached to, and those things will keep happening, and then they will cause suffering. And then if we are earnest about, like, oh wow, this thing is causing me suffering, let's do something about it, then that will be the resolution. So all we have to do is be earnest. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Just keep
Yeah.
keep on keeping on, and then life will keep throwing challenges and slapping you. And that doesn't mean you stop.
We'll keep pretending like we're surprised and shocked. And it's like, well, why is this happening?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, of course it's
Exactly.
happening because I have this issue, and it is going to happen. Yeah,
Ah, such is life. Yeah.
yeah.
So there were this group. It was a bunch of Christians, one Muslim, and a couple of Hindus. Okay, that's just the way they grew up. So
Hmm.
it's a very interesting conversation. So, and we have atheists too in the group, by the way, a Christian who became an atheist. Um, so all these conversations are going on, and everyone's like so friendly, and everyone is, you can like totally, make fun of the other religion, make fun of the other person. No one takes it personally because everyone, because you're like, making fun of your own religion at the same time. So like, it's not offensive in any way. It's like a totally open conversation. But what was interesting to me was one person asking, well, why is your God riding a rat?
This
To
is what,
person,
like, Ganesha is.
Ganapati.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Ganesha. Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
like that's all you have seen growing up, and you just assume that's all there is to it. Because from a
Sure.
Christian perspective, all you know is Jesus was born and Jesus is the Son of God, end of story, and he saved you. There's
Hmm.
nothing more to it. So it sounds more uh, understandable, I guess, because the story is so simple, but it's really not that simple the more you dive into Christianity, by the way. But, anyways, on the surface level, it's simple. But on the surface level of Hinduism, it doesn't seem simple. It goes against some of the things that, uh, realistic principles, I guess, of life that most people are used to.
I mean, it is a complex topic because I think even the idea of what Hinduism is Hinduism is like, 4,000 years of people doing a bunch of things, and all of them
Mhm.
put together, somebody said, "Oh, that's Hinduism." But if you were to, and we needed something to write in a passport, so we wrote, "Oh, I'm Hindu," right? But there are so many diverse practices and structures and cultures that exist within Hinduism, right? So somebody like worshiping Ganesha, I suppose, will be very different than somebody who's an Advaita Vedantin, which is somebody who is, a Krishna worshipper who versus a Shiva worshipper worship versus, a Kali worshipper versus a Durga worshipper. They're all and if you even go to this local, which is the village level, like each village has their own deity. So it's very weird, right? Like you can't club them all together. It's very difficult. You can try to understand certain parts of it, um, and there is this underlying theme, which is another, I suppose, which comes down to that. But at the level of understanding, at the surface level, like it would be like, oh my God, this is chaos that's going on, right? At this, because there's just so many different threads that are not seemingly connected, uh,
Mhm.
but the root of it all is liberation. I think that's what ties them all together. And some of them
So,
might, sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead.
And
Yours.
I was gonna say, like one person might look at the other person, like let's say I'm a Shiva worshipper, I might look at like the Ganesha worshipper, or maybe not Ganesha, but Krishna worshipper, and say you're an idiot, right? Because my understanding of what I'm doing is catered to my mind, the quality of my mind, what attracts me to this type of practice. I can relate to the practice, but like somebody else doing something completely different, I may not relate to at all. And I would say that's an idiotic thing to do, which is true for me, but it may not be
Mhm.
true for the other person. And so every practice has its place so long as it makes sense to the person and the person doing it has value and understands what the practice is and how it moves them in the direction that they want to move towards. So it's very important to understand the goal of what we are doing and why we're doing it. Right? Otherwise, you're
Mhm.
just kind of blindly doing things, and then it becomes tribal knowledge where like nobody really understands what's happening, and everyone's just doing it because everyone else is doing it, right?
Right.
And that's what we find for the most part, where the understanding is lost. Um, but but if there is an understanding, then every practice has the potential of being useful. And
Mm.
then you can look at a practice and say, oh wow, this is solving for that particular thing, and I don't have it, so I don't need to do it. And then you can do something that makes sense for you. So it's a very personalized uh, plate of things that serve your hunger. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, and so that's the beauty of having thousands of years of social experimentation on how to get enlightened. It
Mhm.
was kind of like the science of enlightenment in some ways, where people are just trying a bunch of things, and doesn't since it's a subjective experience, like not everyone's going to agree with it, right?
Right.
Um, and but whoever did got a small following and had a very small group of people who were doing it, and then that was thankfully we had a written culture and people wrote it down, and now when people look at it they're just aghast about, oh my God, you're in a cremation ground and doing all these crazy things. Like that doesn't make sense to me, but it did for those people. right?
Mhm.
And
So you were saying Sanatana Dharma, which is, would you say there were different ways of exploring spirituality within Sanatana Dharma? And Sanatana Dharma, to translate it, it's like the eternal law, right?
right, yep, yeah. Sometimes it's eternal, sometimes it's ancient, but maybe eternal has like some significance because it means that it can be discovered at any moment. That's what something eternal is. And it doesn't mean that it had to have been discovered a long time ago. And if it didn't happen a long time ago, it would have never happened. It just means something that is true all the time, like, like gravity, I suppose.
Mhm.
And so anyone can stumble upon it and discover it and can um, share it with other people.
So you were saying within Sanatana Dharma, someone could have gone into Shaivism, someone could have gone into Advaita Vedanta, someone could have gone into Dvaita, right?
Right.
So and I'm sure like all these words need translation, but these are all different paths to explore. But the underlying principle is that these paths are meant to be explored for liberation from suffering.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think moksha in the Hindu language, I guess Sanskrit, the word is moksha, which is in parallel to nirvana in the Buddhist world, which means
Mhm.
to be blown out, which is I do no longer have uh, any sort of compulsiveness in my mind and my body, I suppose. And so that has been extinguished. The compulsive nature has been rooted out completely, and I am now at peace with what is happening. Uh, and so if you notice our suffering, the most of the time it is because of our compulsions of things must be a certain way, or I'm not getting what I want, or somebody's behaving in a way that I don't like. And so it's it's a very physical and mental response of one like forcing the world to be in a certain way. And so that ends. And so any practice that is aligned towards making us aware of our compulsiveness, uh, and and then potentially, maybe helping us root it out, is Sanatana Dharma. A part of it at least. Um,
Mhm. So,
and
how do you resolve the or reconcile the differences within different paths,
mhm.
even though it came from Sanatana Dharma?
Yeah, I
And
think
then,
because, yeah,
Mhm.
what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just going to say, just even the understanding of God, um, the relationship to the self and God is slightly different in subtly different. I shouldn't say there's a big difference, but there are some subtle differences within. And does it matter, those differences?
Yeah, that's a good question. Does it?
So if I'm honest, I when I was learning Advaita Vedanta, and I have not learned to the extent that many people dedicate their lives, and when I talk to you, I feel like you have so much knowledge around that philosophy and teachings and tradition. But from what I have, the work that I have done, I struggle with the and it's like, again, I go back to it's such a subtle difference that I decided to let it go. So I struggle with the concept that I am God.
Hmm.
I so if like there's a circle, and this is something that resonated with me when I was reading this book by Father Richard Rohr, and I kind of aligned with a different way of looking at God and my relationship with God. So and Advaita, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is God, the big circle is God, the little circle me would be part of that inside that big circle, which means, and then
Yeah,
the
I would
other,
say there is no in Dvaita, you would say. Were you describing Dvaita or Advaita? Sorry, I didn't
That
understand.
Advaita,
Okay.
Advaita, that
I
you
would
are
say in
one
Advaita,
with,
there is no circle.
there's no God.
There is no circle. There, everything is God in some way because there is only one thing. There's only one substance that everything is got the same um, material, you can say. It's like,
That's
the
oneness. We're
yeah,
all part
but
of the one.
it's actually not two-ness. That's what Advaita literally means, right? Which it means not two. It's like we are, it's acknowledging our direct experience of noticing diversity, right? When somebody
Mhm.
says, "Oh, everything is one," you're gonna be like, "What do you mean? Like I am here, you are there. There is a separation. There are these trees, there's birds, there's animals. There's so much diversity in this life. So what are you talking about? That everything's one?" So Advaita Vedanta doesn't start off by saying it's oneness. It says it's not two-ness. And
Mm.
so, despite the fact that it appears that everything is different and varied, uh, actually everything is the same thing. It's got the same essence. So it's the essence is what we are looking at because
Mm.
all of our suffering is because of a lack of understanding of what we are and who we are. We sometimes assume that we are our personalities or we are our physical bodies, and because of trying to have control over that, which clearly we don't, we suffer, right? So Advaita Vedanta and other practices too, they are essentially turning our attention to what is our essential nature. So that's the root problem we're trying to solve. What
Mm.
is my essential nature? And that essential nature is the same in me, which is the same in you. And so that's where the shared oneness comes through. Despite the fact that you are looking way different than I am, you have a different cultural conditioning. I have a very different cultural conditioning. So there are these differences, but our essential nature is the same. The light of awareness that I have that illumines my experience is the same light of awareness that you have that
Mm.
illumines your experience. So that's kind of I would say, the TLDR version of what Advaita is.
I love that. I think maybe using the word God can be confusing,
Yeah,
and and
absolutely.
and that's why I like how you said it's really that element of light or whatever you want to call it that is the same in all of us. Um,
Hmm.
it's that same, and even from the other day I was talking to a friend of mine and we were talking about the first law of thermodynamics, which is energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Hmm.
So it always existed.
Right.
And we all are just vibrations of energy. So, from that perspective, like I can intellectually understand that oneness,
Hmm.
peace, right? Because we are all just vibrating at different frequencies.
Right.
But when you put in the word God, immediately my mind goes to, well, then does it mean that I am God? And I've thought so much about this over the years, and I resonated with this principle. So if I were to put God in a circle, and I'm trying to understand the humans or my relationship with God, I have experienced, this is my personal experience. I have felt I um, am part of God, which
Hmm.
means I have the divine spark in me. And I 100% believe that because I feel the connection to everything around me when my mind is clear and I'm present. I feel that drawn to everything around me. Um, but I also have the human tendencies of the subjective reality that I am experiencing. So
Hmm.
that's the part that steps out of that circle because I can't be in oneness all the time. I am not united with God all the time because I continue to have this subjective reality outside of that. So it's almost like there's a circle and there's a circle that's a smaller circle that's partially within the big circle but also outside the circle, and I think it's all just thoughts
Yeah.
and Like
Like
it's
map, that's a good, decent map that if that works for you, but the map
Mhm.
is not the territory, right? The map is your description of the territory, but the territory has a lot more detail and qualities that cannot be described by the map. But like one thing that did come to mind was when you said, there's times when you do feel connected to God, and there's times when you don't, right? In Advaita Vedanta, and I guess in many different, uh, like in finance too, I think, there's this process of inversion, and
Mm.
which is instead of defining the problem in the way, like in our case, like is there God, or you flip the problem and you invert the problem. So, Advaita Vedanta posits the fact that you are God, right? Like you are not separate from God. I would flip that and ask you, like, what is so the question would be, what is the opposite of that question, which is like God to me equates like happiness and bliss and pleasure. So the inversion of that would be what causes suffering, right? So like where are my what are the reasons where I don't feel connected to God?
Mhm.
Whereas like we want to feel connected to God all the time. Like I want, like, and then somebody's telling you you are God, and it's like, oh wow, that sounds really nice, right? But of course I want to feel connected to God, like, who wouldn't? And so we build an image of what that would feel like and what that would look like. But that's just an image, because that's not our direct experience, right? Like if it was, then you wouldn't be trying to go there. You would be already there. So then instead of doing that, you flip the question to be like, what is currently causing me to be disconnected? Because there are moments when I seem to feel connected, but there is moments when I feel disconnected. So the focus of our observation and the practice is looking at moments when I feel disconnected. And so if
Mhm.
maybe if we do remove the cause where we start to feel disconnected, then what will remain is being connected. And so we wouldn't have the thought of, oh, I want to feel connected, because you're moving away again into this image of being
Mhm.
connected all the time, and not with the fact, which is I'm right now feeling disconnected. So so the focus is always on like, oh wow, I am bringing my attention back to the fact of the current situation. And so, in Advaita Vedanta, this process is called neti neti, which is like
Mhm.
you're negating everything that you're not. So it's a negation. It's not,
Mhm.
you can never arrive at God by positively affirming, right? You
Yeah.
can only negate what you're not, and maybe then you might arrive at something where, you know, beyond what you think is God. Uh,
Mhm.
and yeah.
So, would it be fair to say that devotion is a way to connect to God? So, what I gave up, honestly, which was probably good for my journey, at least at this point in my life, is to always be one with God. Like I'm not thinking about it, I'm going to be one with God, but I do want to surrender to God, if that makes sense.
In my experience, like devotion, like, so I have also done a little bit of bhakti, you can say, like devotional practices. And that's very useful when there is a certain disconnection, right? So like when I'm feeling disconnected, you can then invoke, or to counter that disconnection, you can invoke feelings of connection.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, you are connecting to something that's already here. You're not connecting to something that's out there, because if it's out there, it wouldn't be in your experience, right? Like you're connecting to something that's already within our experience. And so this devotional practice allows us to put our attention and poke through the current challenge, right? Like, and I'm like, I don't like something that's happening in my life, and I feel like it's like a huge problem, and I'm feeling really distraught. And then devotional practices can help me focus away from that and channel it towards the divinity which is in me already, right? And so like I create this connection, or a lack of a better word, or like move my attention away from tragedy into divinity. And so that feels good, right? Because my attention is no longer on the tragedy, it's on this divinity, which is already here. So all that I have done is move my attention, and I've noticed that, oh wow, this is feels way better, and I feel connected to God. And that is certainly a good way to describe it, which, many people use. But what has happened is you have connected to yourself, right? Like you haven't connected to anything outside of yourself, uh, because we only experience whatever is here, right? We don't experience anything super. We can say there's something supernatural that exists, but even when we do experience that, it's within the sensory experience of mind and body. And so, yeah. So,
So I'm going to ask a question, and you know, like I said, like all these subtle layers of different teachings and traditions, I think it all points to the same truth. So, but I am just so interested in dissecting it. Is the only reason I'm asking. So, let's say I would take a parent and a child, for example.
hmm,
Child comes through the parent, but the child is not the parent necessarily.
hmm,
Um, a fruit comes through a tree, but the fruit is not necessarily the tree. And but the child still has your DNA, so it's not that the child is not part of you. And God has so many meanings in so many people's eyes. For some people, it's an entity that has always existed. All this world came out of that entity.
hmm,
Um, Now, Advaita Vedanta says that there's no such thing, it's just a perception. Yes, but could it also be separate? Because everything else around us shows that, yes, it has the essence, but it is not that. It contains that, but it is not fully that.
hmm. Well, there's no way to prove that, right? What you're saying is a hypothetical statement,
Yes.
which can never be verified. You can never know whether there's God outside of our experience. Like, even if we do experience a God, it would still be through the faculties of our mind and body, uh,
Mm.
or maybe beyond mind and body, but it's still within this framework of experience. And so, which is why I guess it's not important to really focus on whether there's God or not, right? Like, even to think about, why do I want there to be a God?
Mm.
Right? This person or this thing or this entity is something that provides solace and can solve my problems and can give me peace and happiness and all of these things that I'm desiring. So the focus is on, what am I desiring, and why am I not able to get what I want, from not from a material standpoint, from a psychological standpoint. Psychologically, I want qualities of peace and happiness and contentment and a bunch of things, but I don't seem to have it. And then we create this thing of idea called God, right? And we hope that that thing can deliver what I am seeking, right? So at the end of the day, it's about wanting those qualities,
Liberation at the
yeah,
end.
and wanting
Yeah.
liberation, and we just try to frame it in this interesting way of, like, God and like supernatural, and I can connect to them and have those qualities and feel really connected. All of those things may be true from the person's experience trying to describe what's happening, uh, but you have to, at the end of the day, look at what is preventing me from being connected, right? Like, what's coming up that's not allowing me to feel connected all the time, or what's caused. You can't even say what's causing me to feel connected. The only thing you can really look at is what's causing me to feel disconnected, because we're actually connected all the time.
Yeah.
uh,
We are
and
just not tuned into it. We're connected all the time. We're just not present with it. Would you say?
right, and there is a strong
Always.
belief that we are not, And like we start this journey of wanting to be connected, but there is no journey. Like, we make this effort of moving in some direction only to return back right here to be like, oh wow, I'm connected. I always was connected. I only thought I wasn't connected, and it was such a strong, you can say, illusion, or it was a strong belief that I was not connected. And so all of my life's endeavors was like to find the thing that makes me feel connected. Because I know for a fact that I do feel connected sometimes, like you described it, saying sometimes I do feel connected. And I describe it as, oh wow, that thing made me feel connected. I must do it again. But the fact is, we are not observing all the things that we do that causes disconnection. And we only notice the moments when we feel connected because it feels so good. Uh, and then we try to find cause for why we felt that way. And usually it tends to be, oh, because of this person or this cool thing that I did. And then we want to repeat those experiences. And only much later we figure out that, oh, wow, it actually wasn't that person or the thing. It doesn't bring me juice anymore. And so now I search for something else, right? So it's this search for connection that we think is outside. Like, but the fact is, there is no outside. Everything is like right here. Everything that we need is happening in the now. So even in the now, if we are not feeling connected, we have enough information to be able to see what is causing disconnection. And that's the focus of Vedanta, which is, there's this negation process. And once we negate, we have this ability to like put something, our attention is always hyper focused on a problem in life. We love creating problems, and we say it's because this person said this to me at work, which is why I'm feeling so shitty. And our attention is always on the problem. But if we have the ability to put the problem on the side, to say, oh, I'm not going to think about that, you've sort of trained your mind to negate it. So that's one of the practices in Advaita Vedanta, which is you don't pay attention to something, it dies. Like the energy of it falls. It doesn't mean you don't acknowledge it. You acknowledge that, oh wow, I'm really annoyed at this person, but I'm not going to keep making up more and more stories about it. I'm going to put it on the side. And then the energy of that falls away. And so as we do that to different aspects and different things of our life, then we start to get more and more space in the mind to then see that, oh wow, there is this space and connection available all the time. And I am manufacturing discontent and disconnection.
That's what I love about Vedanta and Buddhism also, because it's really a practice of self-inquiry.
Yeah.
It's really just asking yourself a lot of questions over and over. And I guess that's what drew me to Buddhism to begin with. And maybe it's very different, but like to my understanding, like, going to church and devoting yourself to Christ, Jesus, that was already a devotional path. But it didn't teach about the psychology of the mind, what suffering is, how suffering arises. So for me, these were like just beautiful, beautiful traditions that taught me that, because we only can experience this world, as you said, with our five senses. And devotion is very helpful. I have a couple of friends who are bhakti yogis. It's extremely helpful to be able to wake up and start your day with devotional practices. All of that is beautiful. Do you think a devotional path could also be acknowledging and surrendering to the fact that that we are in this 3D world and our understanding of this universe is limited, and can it be a sense of surrendering, almost like watching a movie and saying that, yes, I understand, I am just a character for these 2 hours in this
Yeah.
movie, but someone else may have created the movie, and
Right.
so like surrendering to that impermanence in many ways that we don't have much control over. And that gives you freedom also, right? When you're surrendering, knowing that you have absolutely no control what the next moment brings, there's freedom in that. And
Right.
allowing the universe or God, whoever, however you perceive it, to unfold the way it's supposed to. And then you stop this gripping to like make things go your way. I've experienced that part of
Yeah.
devotion also.
Absolutely. I think devotion and many practices are like a practice of self-forgetting, right? You're forgetting yourself in the practice
Love
because you're
that.
not, and then the gripping and all of the things that come about when the ego is the solidity of the ego is believed into, then there is this struggle and this, you're kind of clenching on and trying to resist what's happening. But when there's self-forgetting or like the ego, you're no longer like remembering that you're a person and you have all these problems and you kind of forget all of that. And then you just kind of
Mhm.
are flowing with the practice or you're flowing with the song or like the chant or whatever it is that you're doing. That does feel good because so that is proving to us that the belief in the ego's solidity is the cause of suffering, is a
Yeah.
cause of suffering. And when these devotional practices show us that, oh wow, the fact I thought all of that was a minute ago I might have been suffering, but the moment I started doing these practices, I'm not. The mind is seeing that, right? And then you
Mm,
start to see that maybe my problems in the world are not really problems, like, or rather, I'm making them bigger than what they are,
mm,
and that is the cause of my suffering. Like, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to meet the problem and solve it, and it certainly would be much nicer if I didn't have challenges in my life,
mhm.
but that again isn't up to us, right? Um, and so
Right.
yes, so yeah, I think devotional practices and frankly, all spiritual practices are a practice of self-forgetting.
Mm,
And also there is this aspect of insight which also happens, which is I realize that I had this belief which was not true. I believed that I was not connected to everything, right? I thought I was a separate individual, but I am connected to everything. I thought my ego was a concrete thing that I thought I had control. I had all of these different beliefs, which they start getting challenged. And
mm.
once you start challenging them, then, you know, things start shifting. And yeah,
Yeah.
and it's an automatic process. I think it's a maturing process, like
Mhm.
puberty or evolution. Things are naturally taking their course.
Yeah.
Um,
You can't force it,
yeah,
right?
you
It
can
has
force
to
it.
organically, yeah,
And
happen.
you can try to force it, but then you will
Struggle, suffer then
you
again.
yeah, right. And I think that's part of it too. Right.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
there is this pendulum shift that you force it and then you realize, oh shit, that's too much. Then you kind of
Yeah.
like come back here and they're like, oh, it's too little. So everyone finds their like happy middle, which works for them.
Mm,
Which might include devotional practices, which might include insight practices, which might include physical practices. That's why
mm,
there's no one way. Like, we
yeah.
seem to think that there is one way, but every person has their own unique concoction of issues that needs to be worked through. And, there's all these different practices available for each of them.
So true. So, in yoga, I was taught there are four paths. There's karma yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga, and jnana yoga.
Hmm.
And is Advaita Vedanta, would that fall under Jnana Yoga? Or some people say
Yeah,
Jnana Yoga. I don't know how
yeah,
it's
it's Nyan. The Sanskrit
Jnana.
is Nyan, and I
Mm,
think the Hindi is Gyan.
Jnana.
Um, so it does fall under Jnana Yoga.
Okay.
And essentially, it's an insight path, which is you're using the mind to get out of the mind. That we spoke about self-forgetting, ego forgetting. And when we live in the world of the ego, then we are only living in our mental, thoughtful place.
Mm,
And with these practices, we're trying to see that the thought world is a fleeting experience. Um, And it's not a path that's accessible to everybody, right? Because it requires a lot of use of the mind in a way where you're intellectually using it, and so that you kind of have to have certain intellectual like qualities where you like figuring stuff out, you like to know things, you like to understand things, and not everybody is suited for this. And so
Mm,
it's because of that, it is pretty self-filtering. Somebody
mm,
might listen to or read about Advaita Vedanta and be like, this makes no sense to me, and it automatically. But like somebody who reads it be like, oh wow, this really resonates with me, and they kind of go down that path. And so that is true for pretty much every tradition. And usually Advaita Vedanta is always uh, preceded by bhakti and karma yoga.
oh,
That's been the tradition. And so if
mm,
you come into Advaita Vedanta too soon and you don't like it, it generally means that you have a lot of worldly desires that are yet to be fulfilled. And you're like,
mm,
this makes no sense. Like, what does it mean to renounce everything? Right? Like, that doesn't
mm,
appeal to me. And so you
mm,
still think that the world has a lot of happiness producing qualities. And so you do karma yoga, you go out there, extinguish your karma in the way that makes sense to you, and then you may come back to the Vedanta and see if this now resonates with you. Uh,
right.
and so there are a lot of stories that you find in the Advaita Vedanta text where there is a person who meets a great Advaita Vedanta teacher on the road, and then this person gives him the knowledge right then and there, and this person doesn't understand anything. And then the teacher
Mm,
is like, "All right, you're a dad. Why don't you go meet this other teacher who's going to like teach you, devotional practices?" So this person goes there, practices for like 12 years under this teacher's guidance, and then after 12 years, he realized, you know what? I met that teacher 12 years ago. They said something really significant. Maybe I should go meet them again. And then they go back, and now that teacher says the exact same thing, and what this lands completely differently. And
yes.
then they start that sort of that journey, which is the same journey, but now they're ready for that subtlety of the journey.
Yes.
Um, and so
That
which is why I think these paths are cyclical, also linear, but and it just depends, and it's so subjective that there is no one recipe that works for everybody.
mhm. I can totally relate to what you just said about being exposed to something at one point in your life and it made no sense, and then 5 years later you read it again or you listen to it again and it's like so profound. You're like, how did I miss this? So that
Right.
happened to me. Sorry. So that happened to me. Somehow I came across this book called Tao Te
Mm-hmm.
Ching. It's like
Mm-hmm.
Taoism book based on like the Taoist principles. And it was like years ago. I want to say maybe 20 years ago. Somehow I came across that book and I read it and I was like, what in the world is this? I,
Right.
I read it, it talked about the way, and it was just like really weird to me at the time.
Right.
And then maybe 5 years after that, I came across the book again, but it was in a different version. By then, I had like started learning a little bit of Buddhist teachings, and then 5 years later, I came across Change Your Thoughts and Change Your Life, and it was by Dr. Wayne Dwyer. And I started reading that, and then I realized it was the same Tao Te Ching, which he translated to his understanding of what each chapter was about. But even before even reading his translation, I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I completely forgot that I had seen that book before because I didn't put the two together until I came across the book again. And I
Hmm.
was like, wait a minute, I've had this book all these years. But it just didn't make any sense to me because I was at a different consciousness, or I
Yeah.
was experiencing life differently at the time, and maybe I wasn't looking for it. Sometimes you have to look for it, right, to know what you are trying to get out of it. So yeah, I can completely relate to that. That was So now when I read something and it sounds stupid sometimes or I don't understand it, I now I know to tell myself, you're just not ready to receive whatever it's trying to tell you. It may be stupid. Even 10 years from now, you might look at it and go, it doesn't make any sense, but it
Right.
could be insanely profound, right?
That's this similar story of how I met my teacher, which is I found this very obscure book at flea market in Berkeley, in California, and I was like, this really old book and it's like in tatters, but it had like the word Swami on it. So I was like, oh, I've never, it looks like an Indian book. And this, it was a bunch of, and the guy was a Black Panther Society person. And so he had all these Black Panther books, but then he also had this book. So I was like originally looking at these Black Panther books, and then, I was like, oh, you have this book too. It's interesting. And so I bought these Black Panther books, and I was like, okay, I want this other book too. And, trying to negotiate the price and whatever. It was like ended up being $3 for this book. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, and then I came back home, I put it on the shelf, and I didn't really think much of it because it was a really old book and it's dense. It had a bunch of like Sanskrit in it. Um, and then I met my teacher, and then I didn't know what his training was, but I just knew that I wanted to get into Advaita Vedanta at the time. And then he talks about his own teacher, and then he says he's going to be teaching this book. Uh, And I was like, oh, that book sounds familiar. And then I went, and this was like maybe a year after I
Yeah.
bought the book. And then I went back and I'm like, oh, this is the book. And, I had the book by the same person. So his teacher was the one who wrote this book. And so I had that
Wow.
copy, the copy that he was planning to teach in class. And so there was this weird like synchronicity there, but yeah, that's kind of how it happens. Like I wasn't ready to read it that time, and then like just so happens, and yeah, 1 year later I was gonna read it with him.
Yeah. And is it possible to shift between things or to be, let's say, you're a Jnana yogi or Jnana yogi for a few years because you were so um, intrigued by the teachings and you have an analytical mind. And then at some point you want to understand your actions from a karma yogi perspective and to understand swadharma, how that
Hmm.
kind of fits in, and then go into bhakti yogi or yoga,
Yeah,
and maybe have elements of it throughout your life,
yeah. I
but
mean,
one dominates. Yeah.
yeah, totally. Like I would say from my own experience, like I'm, certainly not an expert to say whether it's possible or not, but what worked for me, I started my work completely in the insight world, doing Buddhist insight practices, and then came to Advaita Vedanta. And at some point, I just had the desire of started to chant and like doing devotional practices out of nowhere. I was an atheist for my whole life, but I did did see my wife do some of those devotional practices, and I would never really relate to it, and I would not scorn at her, but I would just never understand. To be like, what is this? This makes no sense to me. But I'm obviously not going to like comment on it, but she would do it whenever she found time, and it never like was something I wanted to join her as well, because like sometimes she would join me in meditating, but like there was this whole weird thing like, why don't you join me in my meditating? I'll be like, this is something I just don't connect with. But then at some point that shifted, and yeah, and then I started to like learn these chants and like actually try to memorize them, which was mind-boggling. And because they were also in Sanskrit, I used to hate that language as a kid. It's like so all these shifts started happening, and yeah, and so there's that. And then now in my current world, like I'm not really doing any sort of practice per se, but I am going and looking into any sort of remaining past like trauma and hurt, which is a very different modality, which has nothing to do with like yoga in that sense. Like you don't actively like look at trauma and you look at childhood things, but that's something I'm doing now. And so yeah, I don't think there is a set path of things, right? Like it's whatever
Mm.
seems to be coming up, and whatever feels right. There are these various tools that are good for the job. Some, you can't use a hammer for everything. So, whatever works for you and whatever seems the most relevant, whatever seems the most important. Uh, yeah, I believe that every person has intelligence to move in the direction that they feel is most appropriate. Um,
Mm.
and it's that's why I think it's also helpful to be in a sangha, or like in a world where like you have fellow travelers, and you can discuss things, and you can also having a teacher, I think, is very important. Like they can also suggest different things that you can do. uh, and yeah, certainly there is no one path.
Right. An enlightened person, in your opinion, and the way you envision someone like that, would that person have 100% control over their five senses? So, do you have an idea of what that person would look like in the sense physically, because they have full control over what goes into their body, emotionally, because of the way they would respond in situations? I guess physically and emotionally are the only two ways you can actually see someone. We don't know how someone might, the spiritual connection would be something that we can't be in that
Yeah.
person. Do you have
um,
a
so
vision?
yeah, I would say the first off, enlightened person doesn't make sense, right? Because I think the enlightenment reveals to us that we thought we were a person, like an individual, but we are not. And so the the person, uh, the belief in a person drops away. That's the first, I would say, uh, outcome or the consequence of insight. So it's an insight. It's not really like a thing that happens. It's more like a perception shift where like you stop believing. It's like you stop believing that you are a short person or a tall person, right? Like maybe you believe that for your whole life and you're like, oh, wow, actually, I'm not. Like there's no like real change that actually happens other than just like a knowledge that, oh, I'm not that anymore. And so things that in the past might have triggered you because of that belief, that no longer happens. Um, so that's one. And then the second piece is, I don't know, like in the sense, uh, the control of like there is no such thing as control, like to say that life will be exactly how I think it would be, that's also a meaningless thing, because then there is the feeling of control can only come because there is this feeling of an individual who controls things. And so if that drops, then the feeling of control also drops, uh, because there is no controller with that comes around that. So like the ego kind of arises, and then there is subsequently there is a belief in that ego, and that's the suffering, because if I believe that things should be a certain way and they're not, then the ego tries to force the change. And sometimes that force doesn't work, and then that causes more suffering. Sometimes the force works, but then and then that the belief in the ego becomes stronger. Uh, but once that belief dissolves, then all this whole mechanism stops taking place. Where you might have a thought that, oh, I wish this was different, but there's no suffering for it.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
it does.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's personally, I can only speak from personal experience. That's been some of the change. Not to say I would say consider myself enlightened. Like I stopped
No,
even.
no. So
Uh,
you don't even, I really, yeah, like that's exactly what I was trying to understand from you. So it's not, you don't put yourself in a place to look at someone else and say, are you enlightened? Are you enlightened? You've dropped that
yeah,
idea.
the question doesn't make
And
sense anymore. Yeah,
right.
it's like there is no such thing as enlightenment. We think that there is enlightenment as an event or as a concrete thing that I can look at and say that is enlightenment. There's no such thing. There is only suffering that is a thing, and the cause of suffering, right? If those things are resolved, then what might remain is the lack of suffering or the lack of intense suffering or the lack of compulsiveness, all of those things, and then that state of being you may call as enlightened. But there is no such thing as enlightenment, because the funny thing is, like, you kind of go full circle and you come back to where you are, and you're like, oh wow, nothing really has changed. My life is exactly the same, but at the same time, everything is different because we are relating to things differently, and that is true. We can see that in the path as well, where the same thing which we might have been triggered by no longer triggers us because we have solved that particular trigger, right? Like if a person was criticizing us about our job or like our work ethic or whatever it is that like resulted in like feeling inadequate, that sometimes ends fully. You're just like, oh wow, I no longer subscribe to that trigger at all. And you can see that through our entire life, where even when we were kids, there were things were so different. Now things are so different. So there is this structural marked change in the way we experience life.
I asked that also because a lot of people have that idea, and everyone's idea is so different of what an enlightened person would look
Hmm.
like, would speak like. For some people, it's the way a physical body looks in connection to with the way they may be able to
Mm.
do yoga postures. To
Yeah.
someone else, it may be someone who speaks really eloquently all these teachings and how they share these teachings with so much. It's so intellectually
Yeah.
that that may look enlightened to you. And then for some, it might be like this person who speaks so calmly, always giving their responses in a very calm manner, who doesn't laugh too hard or cry too hard, always practicing,
Yeah.
equanimity in the way we think it should be, where there's like very indifferent, not many emotions. So like everybody has their idea of what an enlightened person would look like, I think, because
Yeah.
all these there's so many different teachers in the online space. There's so many teachers we have come across, even within the Indian circle. Everyone's so different, right? So
Yeah.
um so I was just, yeah, I was curious if you had any idea like that, and I really, really, really love what you shared about that.
Yeah. And I think there is one quality of enlightened people, you can say, or is that being in their presence, there is this sense of peace. Like I don't know, maybe at least I feel that way with like my teacher, and I could be conditioned, I could be fooling myself, but when the mind is able to drop, which is something that happens, uh, you can tune into people's minds. And so that kind of is a spontaneous and natural thing that happens even pre-enlightenment, where you can start to sense thought atmosphere. When you enter a room, you can sense that it's tense, or when you enter like a place, you're like, oh wow, this is some people here are having fun, right? Like
Mm,
your mind gets very sensitive. And when we are in a room where the person who's in the room has a quiet mind, that quietness and that silence and that depth of peace that is experienced can be felt.
mm.
Um, and so,
I really like that because when I got in touch with you, it was through what you had written on your website, all the articles that you shared.
hmm,
And none of the articles were emotionally stimulating, and in the
hmm,
sense, trying to make me feel something. It was very neutral, and it was shared with a lot of depth. And and that that was like, I felt very aligned with that, and I resonated with that, because this world is constantly trying, I don't want to say the world, but a lot of, you know, things we hear about these teachings can be emotionally stimulating, like, you know, positive
Hmm.
thinking, or, you know, you have to, you know, wake up and be disciplined, and wake up at 3 a.m., you know, during Brahma Muhurta, and do these practices, and then you will be enlightened. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of that, but it's this, you know, I've done this, and look, I recover, you know, I am now in a different place, or a better place. And all that might be true. But there's something that's momentary in that.
Hmm.
Uh, because, you know, if I'm paralyzed, I may not be able to wake up at Brahma Muhurta and do all the things that you're just telling me to do.
Right.
You know, there's like, so I'm not saying that's not a great thing to explore, but I also think that for me personally, anything that's trying to, you know, force something within me to create something,
Hmm.
I have to look at it, and
Right.
go like, what's happening here, you know?
Yeah. I, like I love this thing in Vedanta which says you are already perfect,
Mm.
right? So it's the recognition of that perfection which is what needs to happen. Because if it was something that is gained through some practice or some intense, effort, then that could be lost too. And if it can be lost and if it has to be maintained and all of that, then it's not perfect because then there are all these causes and conditions that make it happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so like I love this that it's not something that you gain, and because it's something that you do not gain, it's something that you cannot lose, and it's something that's eternally here, and which is what Sanatana Dharma is. It is eternally here. One just needs to have the right vision to be able to look at it, and not through practice, but just through uh, paying attention to something that's already here. So it's about refocusing attention and not so much about, you know, getting someplace. So it's outside of time, it's outside of location. Like you don't have to be in India, you don't have to be in the Himalayas. You can be in the chaos of the street where there's
Mm.
traffic moving by and it's still there, still available. Uh, and and
I
so
think this
that,
is. Mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
No, no, please continue. I like where you're going.
Um, yeah, and so that's I think a teacher who is who's got the taste, you can say, uh, will turn the attention of the other person to that place. And so it's this constant turning of attention to this deep spaciousness that's right here, right now, that feels good immediately. It's not something that's gained and felt later. It's like the moment I turn my attention to this spaciousness that's right here, there is an immediate connection. And I didn't create it. I didn't um, have to make any effort for it to happen. I just noticed it. Just like if I hear a sound, like I don't have to make efforts to hear the sound. It just happens. And so the same thing, it's this effortless being, this effortless noticing and this effortless recognition. And once it is recognized, it cannot be unseen. And that's the beauty of it. So all that is missing is this belief, this removal of this belief that
Mm.
we somehow need to do something or like need to solve a problem to get there. And yeah, and so it gets subtler and subtler where all of these like threads and layers that block this vision starts to dissolve. And so there is some value in doing these practices. So they are removing our cloudy mind and quietening our mind. And though it's helpful for that. So, a good analogy that my teacher gives is like it's trying to put a tomato And so all of these practices are knife sharpening practices.
Mm.
And the slicing of the tomato is the recognition. And so that's when the rubber meets the road.
I like that analogy. It's a
It's
great way
not
to
mine, it's my teacher.
It's wonderful. I think this is a great place to stop. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so let's end this with a short meditation. So you can start by closing your eyes. If you're sitting, just noticing what it feels like to sit, or if you're lying down, or if you're walking. Actually, if you're walking, you should probably stop if your eyes are closed. Yeah, just take a few deep breaths here. Just notice the air filling your lungs, expanding your stomach, and noticing the exhale. Just feeling the different parts of the body. So in this meditation, I'm going to talk about a concept or a practice from the Advaita Vedanta tradition. It's about noticing what is right here, right now. So as you take a breath, you can notice the different sensations that are happening connected to the breathing. You can also notice the different sensations caused by either the chair, the different sensations on your back, on your feet, maybe parts of your leg. These things may be something that you hadn't noticed before, but you just directed your attention to it, and there it is. The same way you're noticing sounds, my voice, maybe you can hear some sounds around you. So it's easy to notice these two different fields of experience, sounds and sensations. And they seem to be effortlessly being created and observed. You might be having some thoughts about what you want to do, things that might have happened today. These thoughts are also effortlessly being noticed. So just notice that there is this effortless noticing that's constantly happening all the time. Just the content is different. Sometimes we get lost in thought. Sometimes we get lost in action, where we are lost in a project or a particular task at home. But this noticing, underlies or precedes everything. So now we're going to try to just notice the noticing. This may get a little weird, but it's almost like you're trying to shine light on the light. You're trying to point the torch in the direction of the light of the torch. If you start to do this, you might notice this spaciousness. Might be this vast space that doesn't seem to have any dimensions to it. The space doesn't seem to have any qualities to it. Just seems like an open sky. And this noticing of the noticing also doesn't require special efforting. You can notice it in the exact same way that you're noticing the sound of my voice. If you're noticing the space or the sky, it's always been here. You didn't have to do anything to create it. You just have to notice it, and it's right here. And in the sky, you might notice that there are all these other things that are happening, like sounds. Maybe you can feel the sensation of your body against the back of your chair, or your thighs on the seat of the chair. All of these experiences are in the sky or the space. And you just notice the space. The space is always here. Maybe you just never noticed it. We can rest our attention in the space. And the space might feel empty, could feel peaceful, could feel blissful too. And you didn't have to do anything to create this space. You remember the fact that this space is always accessible to you at any point, at any time, at any moment. You just have to put your attention and notice it. As we come out of this meditation, let's take a few deep breaths again. Notice this breath too. that's happening within the space. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes.